Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm good. Afternoon.
What a fantastic day today. Nice and bright and breezy outside.
I
Ready
know
to
I was
go.
up. I was up
I tell you
early.
what, what's the best way to settle this? Pension versus property? Fight! That's all I could hear in my mind. It's like Harry Hill. But I tell you what, looking at this, it's true. I mean, you often think to yourself, property is the best investment ever. And then you think to yourself, wait a minute, I've looked at some stats and think, wait a minute, pension's maybe the best investment ever. And then it's like, no, it can't. If you look at it like this way, no, property is the best investment ever. So it's actually getting that right information, that right feedback. I don't think there's any real fit for this, Richard, but we're going to talk about this. You're quite excited yourself?
Yeah, I think it's quite a good topic. Like you say, we're going to look at both sides. We'll look at the pros, we'll look at the cons of both aspects, and see what really is the best for setting you up for later in life, for retirement, for investment at the moment, and creating cash flow with investments and things. It's quite a good topic to cover. So,
Absolutely.
yes,
We're open to questions for people out there. So feel free to ask any questions about properties and investments when we're going through these details. Chip in as well. If you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. How's that? Or what about this? You could add that on. More than happy to take comments and suggestions and anything like that as well. Because at the end of the day, this is only based on our information and what we've gathered together and what I've known over the 30 years I've done property investment, and also for my pension as well. So we're going to talk about my pension. We're also going to talk about property investment and where that's going as well. Let's kick off. I mean, combination. Let's kick off. Both pensions and property investments can actually deliver long-term growth. And when it comes to funding your retirement, both have an important role to play. But we're here really to weigh up the advantages and the limitations of both property. Whether it's buy to let or owning your own home, there's a thing as well. Owning your own home. Most people actually keep beating this drum about your own home as a liability. We'll talk about that in a wee while. But owning your own home is potentially an investment as well, isn't it?
it is. And we had an interesting conversation last week, Jim, about obviously your own property, and you've got a property set up for later in life now that we're renting at the moment, and your current situation. So we'll talk about that later as well. As your own property as a liability, which is quite a good topic to cover, and especially when you're thinking about whether it's buy to let or doing your own property.
So, pensions is a source of retirement income. I mean, if you're really young out there, if you're a young person, do you really care? Do you really bother about retirement income? Is it really that important to you? Is the most important thing to you? I'm not particularly sure. Let's talk about what are the pros of property investment, right? Property investment in the beginning, Richard. What's your thoughts? Not first of all on what property investment is. I mean, average house prices, for example. I was doing some stats. I tell you what. Oh my God! It's like, oh my God! It's like, really? I was like, and I get excited because I've been in this for 30 years and I've got quite a lot of property, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a huge statistic for that to go up. So let's talk about numbers. In the last 5 years, well, put it this way, let me talk about the last 5 years first. The last 5 years, property prices have gone up 29%. That's a huge figure, isn't it?
That is quite a lot.
In the last 10 years, 68%. In the last 20 years, 160%. I'll say that again, 160% in the last 20 years, property has gone up. That's an amazing figure. Let me talk about inflation. If you take that into account, inflation in the last 20 years has gone up 42%. Inflation in the last 10 years has gone up 18%. Inflation in the last 5 years has been 9.8%. I mean, clearly, if you're going to say right now, oh, but inflation's sitting at 10%, that can't be right. It's like, oh, very well. But I'll just remind you, property prices are going up 12.8% in the last year. So they're still outperforming inflation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's what that says to me, Jim, is that obviously people are in a bit of a panic and worry about inflation and the cost of things nowadays. And I think if you were to look at property as an investment, as a way to secure your financial future, it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Anything as well, Richard, though, when you talk about these inflation figures, look at them for the last 20 years. I mean, inflation's only been sitting at 42% over the last 20 years in total.
Yeah.
So when you see a quick jump of 10% in a year, I mean, that could end up correcting itself later on. I mean, before the last 20 years, maybe in the last 30 years or 40 years, it was actually hyperinflation as well. They were sitting at inflation about, I think it was about maybe 25%. That's a scary number, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that was in the 70s. That was before the Conservative Party took power, when interest rates were at 18%, inflation was at 25%. Now, I can't ever see that coming back to that scenario, because that's just crazy. And they know what the ramifications of that is. But I still say perspective, over the medium to long term, property always outperforms inflation, definitely. Everything. It has to. How could it not? Because inflation is a reflection of prices going up. So prices have to go up for inflation to go up. Yeah. And if property wasn't part of that price and it was going down, then inflation would go down, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So what is the pros of property investment for you? I mean, what are you thinking about?
I mean, property investment, I mean, a combination of rental yields and capital growth means that both have immediate income and potential for long-term profit. That creates cash flow, it gives you an income, and then obviously your property capital appreciation, you also have the option to sell the property at a point in time later on, and invest that money in other ways, or release the equity and remortgage, like obviously.
So what we're saying really here, Richard, is when it comes to picking an investment most likely to grow over the years, property has always been a good choice.
Yeah.
I mean, the UK property market has really been famously bullish, despite the occasional slump, typically lasting a few years. As property values continue to soar over recent decades, some investors have indeed capitalized on a trend of building portfolios worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, maybe millions, possibly millions. I think hundreds of thousands away is not that option anymore, really. Millions. In addition, for demand of buy-to-let properties remains high, which it currently does, Richard, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the demand for buy-to-let properties is very high at the moment. And it's a brilliant time to be picking up buy-to-let properties, because the market is so busy at the moment. The people that are, tenants are choosing to rent a lot more. There's so much more tenants and not enough properties to facilitate that at the minute.
Yeah, and demand, more or less, demand always outstrips supply. Yes. Property investment actually is a huge opportunity for that reason. And as you said, along with the rental income, the potential increase in the property value as well, over time can actually deliver a sizable profit when you actually come to sell. If you actually indeed come to sell. So it's the combination of rental yields and capital growth that means you have both immediate income. This is what I love about property investment. You've got the immediate income coming in, and then you've got the potential for long-term profitable growth, which is wealth accumulation, which technically is not taxed until the point you actually sell it. Yeah. You also have the option to sell the property at any point and invest the money in other ways. I find that challenging to do, considering. But I tell you what, though, pensions. We'll get to that. And I think I could sway people's mind into thinking, wait a minute, pensions is the way to go. Also, the main advantage of this kind of investment, though, through property, isn't without its drawbacks too.
Drawbacks.
Well,
there could be if you don't.
I find it hard to believe. I mean, what do you think is your drawbacks? I mean, just off the top of your head, though.
I mean, house prices are often they do produce a good return and things, but it's not always guaranteed. And when working at rental yields and things, you can't expect from your property. You need to consider some other costs, and I think that's where previous shows that we've done about risk analysis and factoring things in comes into play.
Yeah. So what sort of costs would you be thinking about then?
Well, you need to look at obviously insurance costs for your landlord's insurance. You've got expenditure on compliance certificates. You need to think about things like using a managed agent and obviously costs involved with that. Some of these things are tax deductible as well. So that's, and then obviously your maintenance and repairs as well. But yeah, capital growth on your property is basically defined as how much your property is likely to be worth when you come to sell it compared to what you paid for it. But that's the capital growth or capital appreciation is a good thing, because that money that you obviously then can reinvest and continue to grow.
Well, we know that if you've here's the one here, isn't it? And I know what you're about to say. If it continues to grow, you can actually release the equity and reinvest it, can't you?
Yeah.
But the drawback of that is potentially you're causing yourself a deferred capital gain. Well, you will be creating a deferred capital gain, and fair enough, you'll defer it till later on. But if the tide turns, when the time is you have to exit, you could end up having to pay more money back when you actually sell the property, because your mortgage is higher than the actual property value. Less the actual gain that you made in the first place. Now, I only know that out of experience because I've got 1 or 2 properties like that. Yeah. But the key here is I've no intention of ever selling them, so it won't make any difference to me. And over a period of time anyway, they will accumulate in value, but I wouldn't want to sell them anyway in the future. I do know somebody going through this right now, though, who's actually caught into this cycle because of lower interest rates. You know, the deduction. The deduction of mortgage interest against your own income is only deductible at lower rate now, and you can't offset it as a higher rate taxpayer if the property and the mortgage is in your name. Because in a limited company, it doesn't apply these rules. But I do know somebody that's going through that right now. It's fallen foul of that for that very reason. So they'll have this issue. So I'm actually going through their whole portfolio, looking at all the numbers, looking at the cash flow projections, looking at where everything is, and then possibly going back to them and advising them, maybe sell that at that point in time, that at that point in time, that at that point in time. Or it might be the case that just sell the whole lot and this is where you are. So I'm going to have to plan that out for them in order to give them the best advice on what they should be doing.
So do you think that there is, I mean, just not to digress too much, but talking about that situation with this person, do you think they could have avoided this situation that they're in by doing things differently? Or is it just an unfortunate situation they're in?
Well, how I avoided it is quite a substantial part of my portfolio, about half of it, I think, at the time, or maybe a wee bit less, was actually as a capital repayment under a limited company. I'd got to the point where I was in the higher rate band, and in order to avoid the higher rate band, we just created a limited company and left the money in there. So it was never taxable because we never ever take it out, but it was taxable under corporation tax. And then we have the option to take out dividends. But we never did, because it was always an investment vehicle to pour back in to create wealth and all the rest of it. It was never about, oh, I'm wanting to buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or, you know, a fast boat or anything like that. It was never anything like that at all. It was just to provide wealth and generational wealth and give us more choices in the future, and also invest for our family's future as well and generations to come. So I had the foresight of looking at it like that. So we were lucky enough that a lot of the portfolio that I had as a limited company had actually paid down the capital mortgages. It was down at 19% loan to value. And then I was able to then sell over the last, I think it was when I knew this was coming in 2000, I think it was 2015 they told it was coming in. I started to sell some of my properties to the limited company, taking advantage of our capital gains every single year. So in other words, the allowance for Elaine and I was, you know, basically 12,000 each. So you're 24,000 capital gains allowance. So you just plan it and sell the certain amount of properties to take into account that capital gains allowance. So you wouldn't need to pay capital gains on it, and therefore alleviate your position, so you weren't paying tax when you're actually selling it onto the company. Unfortunately, in this situation, you will pay 4% ADS, which is additional dwelling supplement. But in the scope of things, Richard, it doesn't matter. The great thing is we've done it again this year. Unfortunately, we've had to pay 14,000 in capital gains tax early, but I'm just about to transfer 2 properties, pay off the mortgage, transfer 2 properties to the limited company, but they're going to be sold at a loss. So there's going to be a capital loss. and I'll be able to offset that capital loss against my capital gain.
Yay! So there is ways and means of working around it and managing things correctly. And I think anybody listening to that obviously might be like, God, how do you work all that out? And that didn't make quite a lot of sense to them. But then
I'm an accountant. I'm an accountant by trade, Richard.
That's what I was going to say, but I'm saying people should speak to the right people to advise them on how to work that out correctly then.
I would say so, but don't always. I know you're going to speak to the right people, and we'll always say, well, we'll go and speak to an accountant. But believe it or not, a lot of accountants actually don't know the specialist subject, and the reason for that is because they're just mainstream bookkeepers or accountants to sign their things off. They've got a qualification, but they don't specialise in that area. So sometimes you're probably wanting an accountant that'll actually specialise in property investment. So in order, you would be able to give you the right numbers and the right advice on what to do next based on your overall picture. So I get some people coming to me and sitting saying, could you give me advice on this? Could you give me advice on that? And I'm like, well, I can't really, because if I do that, then I'll have to know what your personal income is. I have to know what your other business income is. I have to know what your investment income is, and I'll have to put all that together to then formulate an overall picture about what you should be selling and when, or what you should be actually keeping and possibly paying off the mortgage and when. So it's not just a one size fits all answer. It is a big jigsaw in order to do that. So I sit and think about this all the time, and it just so happens, well, let's be honest, it's Mill Street we're talking about. The Mill Street flats that I've got next door to Rafe Rovers football ground. We bought them at 75,000, 77,000. I was looking at the price to now, and the price just so happens to be about 70 for one. It's on the market right now with Regent's estate agents. So I then said, okay, ours is a bit run down. It'll probably need a new kitchen, new bathroom over time. It's never had that since the beginning, which was 15 years ago. So therefore, I'm probably coming to the right conclusion that the value now to us, if we put it on the market, would be about £65,000. So I will have about £20,000 in capital losses to offset against that gain. So therefore, I'll possibly be able to get some of that tax back, and I'll have transferred them. Now, it will cost me 4% ADS, so 65, 130, 4%, 5.2. So that'll be 5,200 an additional dwelling supplement. But I'm not particularly bothered. It's like, because it's held for the long term anyway. There's tenants in it just now. It's still paying rent. And then what I'm going to do is then I'll take that with the other portfolio that I'm actually buying, and then I'll go to the bank and go, well, that's all ready. There's no mortgage, no encumbrance on these properties I've got in this portfolio. Therefore, you'll be able to use this as security, as a deposit. There you go. So I'm actually building a deposit for my next portfolio purchase in this specialist investment vehicle at the same time. So all I'm doing is I'm utilising the existing money I've got and actually moving it about in a tax in order to get the right return, in order to get the right decisions and the right answers as well, in the best and most efficient, tax efficient manner possible. And taking advantage of the legislation. That's exactly what it's there for. If you've got a good tax planner, they'll know what you need to do in order to alleviate your tax position. I mean, after all, who wants to sit and pay as much tax as possible? No. I mean, you do if it's in a tax efficient manner, because it means you're earning a hell of a lot more money than you were before. Because I had somebody say that, oh, you're going to have to pay a lot more tax. Well, you'll probably have to earn a lot more income then, won't you? It's like, why would you know? It's like the person. It's like when I used to be in network marketing, Richard, years and years ago, and I used to sit down with people and I go, you do this and you do that, and you do this and you do that, and at the end of the month you make about £1,000, and everybody used to go, will that affect my benefits? Hello? What? You're on 50 quid a week, and I'm talking about £1,000 a month. Why are you bothered about your 50 quid a week benefits? And it is that broke mentality people have. They don't understand. They don't see the bigger picture. It's the glass jar. They've got this lid on. They put this lid on them psychologically, and they don't understand that they've actually they've what was it, settled. They've
restricted themselves from aspiring to be anything better or bigger.
It's called settled. You've settled for that amount of money. You think that's all you're worth. Therefore, that's all you'll get. If you think bigger and understand what you're really worth and truly worth, you'll attract that worth towards you. There's an abundance of money out there, and it's all there. You've just got to work out how you can attract it to you. That's all it comes down to. Because he'll go to someone else because it's there. It doesn't just sit there and do nothing on a shelf. It goes to the people that attract it. So therefore, you have to work out how to attract it. And this is what we teach on the Wealth Creation Show. Let's get back to property. The downside is liquidity sometimes is your biggest problem. How easy or hard is it to get your money out when you need it? Classic example, credit crunch. Hello, Mr. Bank. Can I get some money out my portfolio? Computer says no. It's like we're not doing that. But I've got like £1 million in there in equity. It's like, but we're not touching property at all. That's it. We're just not touching property. We're not caring how much you've got and what you're worth. We're not even going anywhere near property. That was the rule for about 3 or 4 years or 5 years after that crash in the 2008 period. So you have to make sure your liquidity is going to be right and it's comfortable for your decision in order to do that. So that is one of the biggest things I would recommend. Make sure you're not relying on the proceeds coming out. I mean, it's possible. I always keep saying to people, in my opinion, always interest-only mortgages. And people say, but I want paid into capital. And it's like, aye, but if the shit hits the fan, it's like they're not going to give you the capital element back that you've paid down. And it's better sitting in your bank account and investing in other things that you can invest in. So and if anything does happen, you can do something about it. Where, like, for example, if your boiler does break, if you have to renew that kitchen, if the house burns down and you're not adequately covered with your insurers. We've seen that before with someone, haven't we? A flood from upstairs, £22,000 it cost them when the insurer turned around and says you're no covered. And it's like, what? It's like they were convinced they were covered. And I told them at the time they weren't, and they were insistent and they were. And unfortunately, this was what happened to them, and they had to shell out that money. So it's better being in your pocket than the actual bank's pocket and paying it down, because the value of the property will increase over time. The mortgage level will always be the same. The rent will go up as well over a period of time as well, long term. The mortgage level will always stay the same. So therefore, you will always start to make more money and profit. Therefore, when the mortgage amount goes up, you're able to then remortgage a bit more back out and actually reinvest it, guess what? In property, and do the same thing again. It's the repeating cycle. It's like what we said, the rinse and repeat cycle. And I noticed that we started coining that phrase and everybody started to pick that up. Rinse and repeat.
But I mean, it is something that a lot of people, like you say, obviously, people are kind of fixated on this. I want to pay into the property and build up capital. But I think if you're, I think, like you
worst
say,
advice ever.
Interest-only mortgages, and like you say, you need to be committed to keep that money aside for like repairs and reinvestment, and obviously don't just go out and spend it, obviously.
For me personally, it's the worst advice ever to pay off your mortgages on your buy-to-let properties. But again, it depends on your strategy. If you're looking to sell later on and you're actually releasing that money, I just want out. There is people like that, and I just scratch my head and think, why would you want to do that? That's like cashing in your policy a year before it's due to mature, and it's like going to be double the price the next year. And it's I don't get that. And they obviously have this impression. It's like, that's it, I'm out. And it's like, well, you could just give it to your children. And let your children earn income as well, and keep it and give it to the next children and the next children, the grandchildren, and 15 generations down, they're still earning money of these assets that you actually had in the beginning, or not assets when you think about it, because by the time you've remortgaged it all up, there's no that much in it, but it's still earning a lot of income. I was going to say a shitload of income. Well, maybe I did.
Well, you've said it now anyway. But yeah, and I think that, and it comes back to as well, Jim. Everybody goes on about cash is king, cash flow, and I think that's something that I really need to keep emphasising to people: cash flow as opposed to cash.
Cash flow is what makes the lifeblood of everything. I mean, if you're planning to fund your retirement from the rents alone, bear in mind that these will not be enough to bring in your income, maybe the income that you need, especially if you still have mortgages to pay on the properties. And that's why some people want to do it, because they've got a bit more agreement. Plus the fact they don't like the reality is because they're retiring and they're reliant on this income, then they want more control. Therefore, they don't want the mortgages in case the mortgage rate goes up and that affects their income, because it's their only sole income. But you shouldn't have that. You should have, and I hate to say it, I hate this phrase, multiple income streams. It's like, it's like all the other gurus, or so-called what they are, call it multiple income streams. No, it's just income streams that actually you've got coming in. One maybe is not dependent on another. So if one doesn't have a great year, the other one will have a great year. And this is why we talk about property and pensions, and see which one's the best out of the lot, and see which one's the forefront of the lot as well. So also bear in mind that being a landlord isn't really an easy job. This is why we have letting agents. This is why you manage my stock and my portfolio. I was a landlord until about 5 years or 6 years after I retired at 38. So it's only the last 10 years I've managed to get you guys to say, look, I've taught you and built the system and says, like, you look after my property now. I really don't want any input in it at all. You need to do it, because I need to be in a position where this is never, the income I'm generating out of this portfolio is not dependent on my ability to perform.
Yeah.
So, and worst case scenario, I could be sitting on a ventilator in the hospital and I'll still be earning money.
You would, yeah.
I mean, at that time, I might not know I'm earning money, but I like the fact that I would be, and I'll still earn money. But I like the fact, and it's like, I mean, Grant Cardone talks about it as well. He says to his wife Ellen, he says, Ellen, if anything happens to me and I drop dead tomorrow, sell the boat, sell the jet, sell everything else, but for God's sake, do not sell the property, because that's what's earning your money for the rest of your life and making you a fortune. And that's exactly how I think. Sell everything else, but the property and the income is the most important thing to keep a hold of. That's my mindset. I mean, property isn't very flexible if you use it in a certain way. But we know how to make it flexible if you want it to be. But you can't just put an extra £10,000 or so into property. It forces you to, I mean, it's forcing you really to invest chunks at a time in order to do that. This is why I talk about, paying off the mortgages. So it's 130. Well, I mean, the mortgages are like 120 grand or something like that. So I'll pay that off. That's probably my next Lamborghini Huracan going. I'll pay that off, and then I'll transfer it, and then I'll get it back out via the banks and the corporate lending, via a different flexible vehicle. So that's the way I do it. So what's the tips for choosing right property then?
Yeah, I mean, we run through the cons there, but I mean, like you say, there is ways and means around some of these areas that the class is maybe cons for property investment, as long as you do things and speak to the right people. But tips for choosing the right property, I mean, investing in the right property and the right location with the right mortgage is really important. I mean,
essential for high yield returns.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's performing much less strongly in terms of growth in certain areas. Like, I mean, if you look at areas like London and the southeast and down England, they perform a lot more strongly than other properties in areas of like Stratford upon Avon.
You've got to think about yields, don't you? And that's where the experience comes into the yields and understanding. I mean, we talk about Fife all the time, and because we're Fife properties and everything like that, and we do everything in Fife. But the reality is, what we're talking about now is a simple model. It's you could use anywhere in the world. Effectively, because
it's universal.
It's numbers that we're talking about, and it's risk analysis and sensitivity analysis as well, and it's opportunity cost and opportunity loss that we're applying as well. So all these models we're using, and these examples and forecasting and extrapolating is all based on it's all universal. You can use it anywhere in the world in terms of how you're doing things. So it's not just specifically for Fife, because a lot of people see it like that. So there is yields that you're making. I mean, some people are actually quite happy with a 2% yield, but your 2% yield essentially might even be it might be. I mean, your 2% yield might end up yielding you maybe about £20,000 a year, because the 2% is maybe on a property it's maybe 2 million.
It depends on what the property is worth in the rental value.
Yeah, so it could be an astronomical amount. I mean, me personally, we're lower value properties, but I'm really trying to do a net 15% return, and if I can get away with it as high as possible after that, so that's my sort of target, and I'm looking to probably get about at least about £2,000 per property in profit after every single one. Now that could be reinvested later on, but that's the kind of your focus and your goal in order to do it, because that for me is the proper investment. That's the proper investment return on what you've got in terms of your equity. That's how a lot of people, if you've not got any equity in it anymore, and you've got all the money back out via a mortgage that you originally put in. That's why they call it infinite returns, because you've actually not got any money in there anymore. So the only way it's getting financed is through the bank's corporate lending, and that's not your money. So that's why it's an infinite return to you, because you're making money on someone else's money. Infinite return.
Yeah.
So appreciation and stuff like that. I mean, how much your property is likely to be worth when you come to sell compared to the purchase price. You talked about an example of purchasing about 80 grand. The current value is maybe 110. There's 30 grand capital appreciation.
Yeah, so it's just obviously some people don't understand the concept of capital appreciation and what is capital appreciation, and basically it's the value of your property currently, if it was to go in the market, compared to what you purchased the property for. And a simple example there, if you bought a property at 80,000, it's now valued at 110, and you got 110 on the market, there's 30 grand capital appreciation.
Yeah, that's a good way. Thanks for that. So rental values have increased, although renters don't have the property maintenance costs on top of what would be if homeowners. Most people are choosing to rent due to the increase in property values. Yep. Tenancies are also flexibility of labour. You know, Generation X, I think it's Generation X that came after baby boomers. We talked about this the other week. The Generation X and the next one after that. I mean, you know, a lot of these people are actually just choosing to rent because they really don't want the tie on of having a mortgage and having a property. But it's the older generation like ourselves that actually try to convince people, oh, property, you've got to own your own property. It's like, but why? Who said that? And you know, and I'll tell you who said that. The banks. So the banks could give you a mortgage.
And that money. It's really ingrained in people to have their own home and own their own home. And I know they say like the Englishman's obviously a castle thing, but it's the same. I mean, it's the whole of the UK. We've all got that mentality, and it's kind of been ingrained into us. But I have seen more and more tenancies are running longer. There is less property available to these people, first-time buyers, because house prices are higher. But a lot of people are doing it through choice. And I've even looked at our own properties that we manage and things. And I think the last time we calculated, our average tenancy was about 28 months. So you're talking about 2 to 3 years. But we have a lot of longer running tenancies as well.
So, but my key here is buy to let really still worth it? I mean, with property prices being so high, I mean, lots of people choose to buy to let as a retirement income, and often taking tens of thousands of pounds out of their pension pot to actually fund it. We'll talk about pensions in a minute, but you can actually get 25%, up to 25% when you retire and you start drawing down your pension pot. You can draw down 25% straight away, tax free. Yeah. And that's what people are actually doing. They're also, I mean, it's a bit complicated. It's another show completely. You can put it into a SAS, which is a self-invest pension, and you could borrow, you could lend 50% to a limited company, which actually revamps property. We've talked about this before, haven't we? And they could actually then revamp the property, get the mortgage on it, and then pay the money back to the SAS, which is part of your pension again. And again, that's tax efficient as well, use of your money. So you're making money on the money, if that makes sense. If you're considering this, then it is essential you speak to the right financial advisors for that. First, because raiding your pension pot could have big implications and potential tax liabilities and penalties if you don't do it properly. It might come back to haunt you, so you need the right advice before you begin. Some of probably the most prevalent person I would say is Ninian Hearn of Independent One-to-One, actually, financial advisors. I mean, he's a financial advisor as well. So I think Ninian would actually be quite good at this. I mean, despite some challenging conditions in the property market, there's still advantages of buy-to-let, including, well, you'll earn income, as we've said, and at the same time, you can generate capital growth, as we've said. You can take out insurance to cover any loss of rental, damage or legal costs. That's covered as well. Incidentally, I've just started a new insurance policy today, and I tell you what, I took it from £9,000 down to £6,000 for the same policy with a different provider. Saved myself £3,000. Now, folk would actually think you wouldn't be able to do that, but I tell you what, get in touch with us. If you're a landlord or a buy-to-let landlord or an investor, and you've got your insurance due up for renewal, get in touch with us, because we'll put you in touch with the right people, because I've just saved myself a fortune, literally 33% in my insurance premiums. I've saved just like that. Better in my pocket than someone else's.
Yeah.
Equally, though, the government will pay more tax. Will pay more tax to the government because I've saved myself the £3,000. They'll have to pay tax on the money I saved because it's classified as a profit then, isn't it? Because I've no longer got that deduction. See that? You were thinking about that there, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's how my mind sees it, you see. You're maybe saving 3,000, but you still got to pay the tax on it because remember, it's not deductible anymore against your profits. Therefore, it won't bring your tax bill down. Therefore, you'll have to, the saving isn't £3,000, it's £3,000 less the tax that you'll have to pay on that profit you would make on the £3,000. Yeah? Make sense?
Yeah.
So you can take insurance cover, but you'll need to consider the disadvantages too. The tax bill will be higher once than it was once, eaten into your profits, like we've spoken about. If you don't have the right insurance in place, you might not generate an income that when the property is unoccupied, if anything happens. If the property prices fall, your capital will fall as well. And if you have an interest-only mortgage, you'll need to make up the shortfall if the property sells for less than you bought it for. This is what we talked about, the deferred capital gain. So this is me just summarising. Also, let me think. You'll need to factor in costs of stamp duty, insurance, wear and tear, finally, the most important thing is not for the faint-hearted. You will have the responsibility of being a landlord. And I tell you what, the reason I say it's not for the faint-hearted because I've done it the both ways. I've been a landlord, I've been an investor, and I tell you what, I'm happy days at being an investor. For the price that you try to save, there's less than a price of a cup of coffee every single day to get someone else to manage one of your properties is a godsend. Did I say that with enough emotion there?
Yeah.
Because literally it is a godsend. It's also important there are a number of taxation changes it was spoke about as well. Okay, landlords used to be able to offset their mortgage interest payments against the rental income, but 2015, as I said, the government announced it had actually been phased out, but it's not phased out in terms of limited companies, so that's still okay to offset the total amount of interest payments against your income. As a personal person in your own name, it isn't. It's only lower rate you're allowed it now, so you lose that advantage. In 2017, 2018, the tax relief you claim, as I said, it was up to 75, 95, 2019 it was 25, and now it's gone. So you only get a 20% tax credit now against interest to actually take off your tax bill at the end, rather than take off the profits before it's actually calculated. So that's why you could end up being a higher rate payer, but actually get deduction at lower rate. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm paying tax on money I've actually not even made. That makes no sense at all.
No.
And in real terms, that's what could happen. The government has actually increased. We talked about the capital gains allowance to 12,300. This is what I'm saying. Husband and wife can use both their capital gains allowance in the same year, even if one of them own the property in their own name, because you can sell it to the other one or gift it, not sell it, gift it to the other one. There's no ADS involved in that. Gift it to them for love, favour, and affection. It's called under the tax rules. And then they can use that proportion to offset their capital gains allowance against. So you can potentially, husband and wife can get, and yourself as well, Richard, you and Gavin as well, you would be able to get £24,600 capital gains allowances.
12,300 combined.
So if you're selling a second property to earn more, so if you're selling a second property, you can earn more tax-free income. But the capital gains rate for higher landlords, now, this is key here. Capital gains rate is 18% for a lower rate taxpayer. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, you will pay 28%. There is a calculator on the Inland Revenue's website which tells you how much you do it. If you sell a property and make a capital gain, you have to report that capital gain for a property to the Inland Revenue within 60 days or you will get fined. Even if you're 1 day late, you'll be fined £100. Why do I know that? Oh, what is that you're asking? Why do I know that, Richard? Because I was late 1 day and I was fined £100. And they didn't let me get off with it. It was like, and I'll tell you what, I tried to get someone else to do it. I tried to get my accountant to do it. I tried to get anyone else to do it. And no one had a Scooby what to do because it was just introduced. So I just went, I'll do it myself, plugged it all in, got it done, but I got fined £100. No, the end of the world, lesson learned. Next time, Jim, you know what to do. You could probably just do it yourself. Private residential relief has changed. Previously, if you lived in the property before letting it to the tenants, you get private residential relief when you came to sell. This means that you wouldn't pay any capital gains tax and for the time that you lived in the property, plus an extra 18 months after you moved out. But under the new rules, it has actually been reduced to 9 months. The £40,000 of lettings relief, which you can claim if you rent out the property that's been your main residence and home before, will only apply to landlords who share an occupancy with their tenants from now on. Right. So you have to be a live-in landlord now. That used to get no bother. So see, they take them away as well. So they take these allowances and they take all these things away and they change all the rules when you've actually got the property. Because I used to have indexation of 60% allowances and capital allowances and on my properties until they changed the rules and went, we're scrapping that, we're changing it. Oh, thanks for that. You didn't have a choice. They've got you because you own them. That's how they do it. So what are the... and right, let's get on to pensions.
Just going to say, let's talk about pensions.
Pensions. Let me get up my pension. And we'll quickly go over this. This is actually quite an emotive subject, actually. Let me get this.
Quite interesting. I mean, listening to what you've told me over the years, Jim, it's made me change how I think about pensions and how I look at them. And I'm sure a lot of other people will be the same, who have had the same conversation.
Yeah, okay. So let me share the screen and I'll show you. I'm going to show you my pension. Ooh, help. People are going to know. Okay, so this is my pension with Standard Life. Yeah. So this is the total payments I've put in over the years. Now, this pension is here. Now, you see that underlying filled out area? That's how much has gone into my pension. And the purple line at the top is that's how much has gone over the years. So that's the plan summary from the beginning, from the very beginning. So the total payments I've put in is 96,750, made up of I've put 44 grand in over the years. My employer put 8 in. My contracted out money from the national insurance system over the years, there was a contracted out thing years ago, was 8,000. The tax relief I got was at 11%. 11,000. So that's free money from the government for the 44,000 I put in. Yeah. The transfer payments was 25,000. That was just other pension funds. The total fund is worth 126,651 pound a day. Okay. Now the only amount. I mean, when you've got employer pension schemes, okay, my advice, if you've got an employer pension scheme, right, take advantage of it as much as possible. You can put in, I think you said, Richard, you put in 3%, your employer puts in 5%, eh?
Yeah, that was last set in 2019. The minimum employer is 3%.
Now, what I would say is some of the employers, I know Ben's employer, my son, his employer matches what you do up to a certain amount as well, over and above that. Yeah. So I said to Ben, I tell you what, put in that maximum amount, because his employer's doubling it. I mean, you're getting 100% return immediately on that, and then you're actually getting your tax relief as well. So you're actually getting 25% of what you're putting in added on from the government, because that's how they work it. That's the low rate amount. Because if you take the total amount, so for example, you had said if you pay £40 in, your employer pays £30 in, and you get tax relief of £10 on top of the £40. And that's what I mean. The 50 with the £50, the £10 of the £50 that you've got in with the government's money is 20%, and that's the 20% low rate. So they're actually giving you £10 free. Your employer's giving you £30 free, and you're only putting 40 quid in total. I mean, that's a pretty good return straight away, and that's where in there that's how that's a pretty good return. Because if you look at the other one, there's the value over 5 years, the plan value. There's the return. Look at that. Look, the 5 years. Over 5 years, 8.6, 8.1, right? But look, 10 years, 76%. See that? Yeah. Down the bottom. So I could easily be dissuaded here and say to myself, well, wait a minute, I'm only making 8% over the last 5 years. That's no good return. And I was in the beginning, wasn't I? But then when I started to look over 10 years, I went, wait a minute, it's actually going up 78%. But that's 78% in that fund that's gone up. Now, remember, I'm in a high-risk category. See up there, that number 6?
Yeah, could I just hide the banner, Jim? Because I think the banner's stopping the figure.
All right, okay. I think that, right, so there's the returns over the bottom. Risk level, Standard Life UK equity pensions. So UK equity, my kids are in UK equities as well. Over 1 year, it's gone up 3.65, 3.74 over 3 years, 5 years, 8.16. But look at 10 years, the compounding.
Yeah, that's
78%. Really good return, isn't it? And that is a good return, because remember, that's 78%, and that isn't taking into account this tax I've got as well.
So
that's the fund is going up 78%.
Right.
So if you take the tax that I've got free, you've also got the contracted out money I've got from the national insurance system for your government pensions when they were doing it. I got that free, and then you've also got employer payments. My employer paid in, and then transfer payments from previous pension schemes. I basically got free. That's a pretty good deal.
There's a lot of free money there.
Yeah, it's like I've only put 44,000 in essence, and I've got 126 grand.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a return. Look at this. Right, let's just work that out. 126, because I'm going to get my calculator out. I like a good calculator. So 126, just the 126,000 minus 44,000, 82 divided by 44, 1, 2, 3, equals 186% increase in what I've put in. I've got 186% return on my initial money I've put in over the lifetime I've put this in. Now, what did I say about property over the last 20 years? 160.
160%.
See, I'm beginning to win the argument for pensions, am I?
You have, as I say, you have made me think a lot differently about pensions.
But remember, the pension, the income staying in here, because I don't get any income out of here, so the income's in here already. Whereas property investment, that 160% isn't taking into account the income that you're generating from the property either. So when you take that into account, the income that you're generating from the property on the 160%, you're almost a bit more than this. So we're almost at like even Stevens here. Now, let me just say, at this point in time, when you look at these numbers, regardless of what I did, I would still get that money from the pension company, from my previous employers. I would still get the contracted out of money. I've still got the employer payments anyway, and I wouldn't have got the tax relief if I hadn't put it in. So the only thing I'm losing out in that scenario is the tax relief if I didn't put the money in.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So my pension would just run anyway, and I just wouldn't put that money in, and I'd put it into property instead. And in the 44%, the 44,000 would actually make 160% if I'd invested in a property. Yeah.
So, yeah, I get that. What I do notice though, Jim, is obviously the benefits, obviously the pension, but you obviously have a successful buy-to-let portfolio running as well as your pensions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why we talk about having a couple of streams of income or wealth generating. It's not because the day-to-day income can be generated for me from the portfolio, which I don't actually use at all. I just actually keep reinvesting. So I have the option to do that when I can. And I'll be honest, Richard, I have over the years dipped in now and again for one-offs like knee operation to do private, possibly. I can't mind what other way. Well, when Jinx got ill, the vet went, well, it's going to cost you a fortune. You may as well put him down. And I went, how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah.
And he went, it's going to be about 1,200 to 1,500 quid. I went, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
If it saves his life, let's do it. And he just looked at me as if to say, what? And I'm like, well, I've planned for this.
Yeah.
This is why I did what I did, because I wanted to make sure I was always in that position to do something. If Tony wanted a house, she couldn't afford it. She needed only up to 90,000 mortgage. It was 130,000 for the house. So I gave her the other 40,000. Yeah. So that again was stuff. So this is the only reason I did what I did, but this is what other people can use it for as well. So it's not, property is not all about doing it for you and all you. It's doing it for you and your family and the things that you actually care about. You know yourself about Richard, about my views about wanting to put money back into the community, into local causes. Yeah. You know, this year we're going to do 30,000. Yeah, exactly. Last year it was 25,000. The year before it was 20,000. The year before that was 15,000. So that would never have been able to happen if it wasn't for property. If it wasn't for that and wasn't for what I did, there was no way I'd be able to do that. So 15 and 20, 35, 25, 40, 50, 60. That'll be £90,000 I've put back in the local community at the end of this year.
Yeah. Which is amazing. But then that's something that you're passionate about, and that's you've got the luxury of being able to do that and doing something, and it's something that makes you happy as well as obviously, like you say, helping family, and then having the luxury of being able to do private healthcare and things as well. But that's because you've set all this up to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I'll be honest. Well, the great thing as well is people go, oh, you went private healthcare, that's terrible, using that system and encouraging these people. It's like I actually left a space for someone actually to take my slot in the NHS system.
NHS, yeah.
So I alleviated that position through my own accord and my own purpose. And that's why I did it. So I freed up a space for someone else to take that. I actually did it a couple of times, actually, because there was a couple of times I had to go for proper, sonograms or whatever it is because I was running all the time, 40 miles a week on the roads and stuff. And I ended up really damaging myself because I kept running long distance and marathons and stuff like that every single day. And I just overdid it. So that was another problem I had to resolve going through private healthcare. Okay. But the other clincher here is look at this pension companies come hell or high water.
Mm-hmm.
Charges.
Yeah.
Whether your fund goes down or not, they're still getting £1,000 a year off of me.
Mm-hmm.
See that? So every single year they're taking £1,000 off of me. You don't do that in property investment, do you?
No, you're not going to get charged for, or like you say, have these charges on there. I mean, that's just over 1,000 there.
So that's one of the other drawbacks. But I can't decry the fact that you've got a 78% over 10 years there in terms of return on investment, and you've got all that free money from the tax man because you're putting in. Now you can put in up to £40,000 a year of your own money and still get tax back. Now I'll tell you what the great advantage of this as well is. You can actually get tax back at a higher rate as well.
Yeah.
So in other words, the tax that you're paying, if you're a higher rate payer right now, if you work it out, you get your accountant to work it out for you, how much you should put in, and you're into your pension fund that year, right? If you contribute that to your pension fund, you get the lower rate put in by the government, but you also get a relief on your higher rate tax bill. So that goes to get offset against your higher rate tax bill. So the higher rate tax that you then get as a refund to you personally. It doesn't go into your pension. You get it as a refund on your higher rate tax bill. So you get your tax back if you do that. So it's another really good way of being tax efficient.
So, and then, I mean, in terms of pensions and things, Jim, when should people be setting up pensions for themselves, for their kids?
From birth.
Yeah, like as early as possible. Yeah.
Straight away. As soon as you have children, grandchildren, anybody like that, if there's any grandmothers, grandfathers out there, if there's any parents out there, if there's any children or young people out there, you get in there straight away and start getting pensions done now. Whether it's 10 quid a month of your own money, to earn, put it into your pension, because I tell you what, the benefits over long term are huge. And this is delayed gratification. This is the farmer mentality. You plant the seed, you nurture the seed, you sow the seed, you reap the rewards big time when it comes out. I'll tell you, it'll blow your mind. You can see there, 44 grand in, 126 grand. Way. And I'll be honest, I never even made an effort of that. And you know what really gets me is I've put less in my kids' pensions and they've got the same amount already. But I was smart enough to actually realise that the government actually contribute up to the low rate threshold for every single child that puts in. Anybody, any of their parents put in for them or any of their grandparents put in for them, any money at all, they will top that up with the tax to the lower rate threshold amount. So if you can put in 2,880 in a year, the government will top it up to 3,600 in that pension for a child.
Yeah.
And your children, forget your employer's pensions. Put them in, take advantage of it, absolutely, for the people that are working employers' pensions right now.
Yeah.
Get as much in as you can if your company is doubling that for you. If they agree and it's in their contract, as I said with Ben's, it's like they said up to a certain amount, they're going to double that as well. It's like, holy shit, that's money for nothing. It's like, it's maybe tied up for all these years, but who cares? It's like you could even get a transfer value of that later on and actually move it to UK equities if you want to do that higher risk category. You know, some people like the low risk, some people like the high risk, but I personally believe over a long period of time, higher risk UK equities, which really isn't a higher risk, to be honest, because it's UK equities, it always grows over time, and it always makes money over time, and it incremental dividends over time, which goes into that fund and builds that fund as well, just like property investment with your income and then putting it back into buying more property. So I do believe that's the way forward in terms. So having a double strategy in terms of what you're doing. So you've got that really long term for 55 years and onwards, but you've got your short term property. And I mean, imagine us talking about short term property investment, because when you think about it, you are generating income straight away. So it can actually provide that in short term if you really want it to, but you have to obviously realise the ramifications. So you've got medium to long term for growth as well. So there's a lot of great advantages to this. And I would suggest you take advantage as much as possible. That would be my thought process. Angela's saying, I have a few pension policies, but some are making a little or nothing. Silly question, but can you move them into one? Yes, absolutely.
Yes, you can do
Angela,
that,
yeah, I'll just say that. That's what I did with mine. So I took all my previous company pensions, like with Beaufort PLC and with Tillis Russell, with who else? There was another company as well. I was there for a short period of time, and I then just transferred them. That was the 25,000 that we talked about in here. So that's that 25,000 here. It's in there. You'll see right at the very bottom, in the bottom left-hand corner of that picture, right here, in there. I'll just take that across. Right there, that transfer payment says all my previous pensions are transferred into one pension policy. Again, take financial advice on this from a proper pension provider to make sure you're okay. Me personally, I knew the numbers anyway, and I sat down with a pension provider and I told him his mind. And he just went after that. He just went, you probably didn't need me in the first place, but I had to sit with you and tell you this. Because he was like, I'll just bow down to you, by the way, and just listen to what you're going to say. And I think he's probably away investing in property as well. So that's where we are. I would absolutely say, because when you think about it, you might have minimum charges on your pension funds as well. Again, check that. So if you've got small amounts in each one, these huge minimum charges actually eat away at your small amount. Whereas if you plough them all into one and consolidate them, your pensions in that one fund, then it actually might be a less of a cost or a charge against it. So you've got, that's another thing a good pensions planner can do for you. So again, Ninny and Hearn, one-to-one, and independent financial advisors would be a really good one-stop shop for everything to look at that. Any other questions? I mean, we've talked about pensions and how you can use them. I mean, you could even use your house as a pension. You know, when you buy your house is your own biggest tax-free asset, right? Now, you might, for people, some people actually buy a rundown property, they do it up, and then they move to the next property, another rundown property, and then they do it up, and they're adding value all the way up. It's almost like taking, you know, taking a wee toy car on eBay, and then by the time you've got 100 trades later, you've got a diamond ring. And it's like, how on earth did you do that? So that's the classic example that you could do with your houses. You could live in it. It's your biggest tax-free investment ever. And then finally, when you're due to downsize, you can just release all the equity. Because you remember about a £500,000 house, you go and live in a two-bedroom house in Glenoffice, two-bedroom semi-detached for what, 100 grand? You got 400 grand to play with. 400 grand, 20 grand a year, 20 grand a year cash. Free, because it's free, remember, it's no taxable because it's your house. So 20 grand a year divided by the 20 grand a year, and you're talking about 20 years at 20 grand a year. In order to earn 20 grand cash in your hand, you've got to earn probably about 35,000 a year. And that's how you've got to look at it. So your own one as well. But again, seek financial professional advice. Your final words on this, Richard, for yourself. Mind blowing.
I think obviously we know property investment and things very lucrative, but you have made a good argument for the benefits of pensions, and I think to have a good combination of both is a good way to plan for your future.
I never thought it would end up like this. I thought property would be all the way, and then I realised it's actually a combination of both.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. If anybody's got any more questions on this later on, please feel free to message us direct. You can catch up on the podcast as well later on. And until next week for the Wealth Creation Show, guys, it's bye-bye from us.
Goodbye.